Welcome to How Women Inspire. You're in for a treat today because you are going to meet my dear friend, Thomasina Williams, founder and principal consultant of Sankofa Legacy Advisors. After a successful career as a lawyer and in philanthropy, Thomasina pivoted into the emerging field of supporting business owning families. Driven by her personal experience with the challenges of creating generational wealth, she brings a deep passion for helping families build stronger, more connected relationships. She is now working to ensure financial stability and family legacy that can thrive across multiple generations. Thomasine is also an LP in our fund and a great friend and advisor to me. I am so excited that you get to meet her today. So let's dive in because what you really want is to hear from her. So nice to be with you.
Well, thank you, Julie. Thank you so much for having me. It's great to be a part of the How Women Lead and How Women Invest community and to be able to share with them in this way.
Well, it is our privilege. So I'd like to actually start with something a little bit fun. So do you have a walk-on song or a song that kind of is the thing you break out when you're happy or need a little lift?
I love this question because I actually have lots of little things like that, different songs. One of my favorites is It's Gonna Be a Bright, Sunshiny Day.
Yeah.
It's an oldie
Uh-huh.
goldie from the
Yes.
70s, but I love that song. It just always makes me smile, gets me up, energized, and ready to go.
I love that one. Can you talk a little bit about you are a practicing lawyer for your foundation, but you also worked in philanthropy in a big, big way.
Mhm,
Can you talk a
mhm.
little bit about this as it relates to also your leadership journey?
Sure, absolutely. I have some people might call it eclectic journey, but I've enjoyed every stage of it. So I did start out as a lawyer, what's called commercial litigation, which is basically just fighting over money,
Yeah.
contractual disputes, business
Yes.
disputes. Did that for almost 2 decades, actually, in Miami before then moving to New York to work in philanthropy.
Yes.
There's this adage that if you can do something that you've been doing for free and they'll pay you to do it, go for it.
Nice.
So, one of the things that I did as a lawyer was a lot of pro bono voting rights and civil rights work. As a matter of fact, a lot of people in Miami think that I'm a voting rights attorney or a civil rights attorney. They don't know you can't pay the bills, frankly,
Yeah,
Nat.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
So that was my avocation. That's where my heart was. Did a lot of that pro bono work. But an opportunity presented itself for me to move to New York to work with the Ford Foundation
Oh,
and to lead up their strategic giving program specifically around voting rights, civic engagement, helping people to understand and appreciate what it means to be a citizen in a democracy and how we not only need to vote to exercise our voice, but to get engaged in public policy advocacy in a multitude of ways. And it was actually through philanthropy that I came to do the work that I'm blessed to do today. One of the things that was really attractive about the Ford Foundation position, it was by definition temporary. It's only a 3-year assignment. I could hang out in New York for 3 years,
yeah,
sure.
yeah.
Ended up staying 6. I did a second tour of duty, and I was deciding what I would do next. I thought it might have something to do with philanthropy, perhaps working with individual families. And I came across a study that talked about how more sophisticated families will use philanthropy as a strategic tool to strengthen their families as much as for whatever the philanthropic cause is.
Yeah.
So we might see the Julie Castro Abrams and family wing of the local opera house, but Julie and her family have been using that as a way to think about, well, how do we make decisions
Yeah.
together as a family?
Yeah.
How do we learn what is important to each family member? How do we navigate differences? If we're going to give away just, for sake of illustration, $1,000, do we want to put that $1,000 someplace to be bearing interest while we decide, well, where do we put it? How do we figure out where to put it?
Yeah.
Julie wants to give to the environment, or no, Julie wants to give to women and girls
Amen.
to help women
I
and
care about the
girls.
environment too, but let's be real.
Exactly. Correct that example. But somebody else in the family might want to give to the
Uh,
A third person might be more interested in animal rights. We only have $1,000 here, guys. How are we going to decide? What is the process by which we make these decisions jointly?
Love
And
that.
then once we make a decision about which general area we're going to give to women and girls, well, that could include a whole host of issues. That can include healthcare. It can include, advocating against trafficking. It could include entrepreneurship. So, how do we decide which of those? And then once we decide the areas we want to give, how do we decide which organizations? There's due diligence that needs to be done to understand what's happening with these organizations. We want to know that they're fiscally sound and how they're managing money. So we need to be able to read financial statements.
Yep.
If we're going to come together, we want to do that in a way where we're conducting it as a business meeting. A philanthropic undertaking is a business. It's simply that its goal is not to make a profit, it's to make a difference in the world,
Right.
have impact. So that's the ways in which sophisticated families use philanthropy to help
I
to strengthen the
love that.
family before it comes to the business or the wealth being handed down to the next generation. And I was like, wow, I really love the high degree of intentionality of that and got really excited about that. And then I started researching that and I came across a proverb that's known as the shirt sleeves to shirt sleeves in 3 generations proverb. You ever heard of that one?
No, but I can imagine.
I'd be curious whether
Yeah.
any of the listeners have heard of that. So, yes, you can imagine
Yeah.
that what it means is historically in our society and frankly globally, the way that families have built wealth is for somebody to start a business. They either literally or metaphorically roll up their shirt sleeves and get to work building that business. So the second generation grows up in a very comfortable lifestyle, benefits from the fruits of the first generation's labor and, frankly, risk taking in starting that business. And historically, if families are not intentional in passing on the values that led to the start of this business, if they haven't been intentional in fostering that entrepreneurial spirit and helping families and individual family members sort of blossom into their own and
Right.
find their way as part of the family, if they haven't prepared the next generation for how to manage that wealth, and frankly, let them know that historically we haven't always had all of this. So,
Right.
helping the next generation figure out not only what they want to do today, but understanding what got the family to where they are
Mhm.
is
Oh,
huge. And many
yeah.
families don't approach that in a very intentional way. So, by the time that the end of the third generation comes along, statistically, most families will be back to shirt sleeves again.
Yeah.
They will
Yeah.
have lost that wealth because they didn't know what to do with it. And I was like,
Wow.
oh my God, that was an epiphany for
Yeah.
me because I realized that's the story of my own family.
Yeah. Oh, is that right? Yeah.
It just wasn't my family that couldn't keep it together. That's something that happens not only in the US, there is some
Yeah.
version of shirt sleeves to shirt sleeves in virtually every part
Oh,
of
yeah.
the globe.
Exactly. Well, and it's amazing how that next generation can make up stories. And furthermore, if you're comfortable, you're not having to take those micro risks, and then you have a lot of fear because you didn't build the muscle of the risk taking. Like there's so
Mhm.
and so I'll tell you in my own family, Thomasina, I put together a small pot of money, but actually said to my kids, you need to contribute too once they had jobs. And we as a family, we interview first generation kids going to college and we give a donation, grant, whatever. We give money to the first generation kid going to college, unrestricted, just cash so they can live. And I'm thinking back on those experiences and in all the times that we've had those decision making, and there's a lot more we could do in those moments. Like, that in
Mhm.
and of itself is our own little tiny baby version of it, well, maybe everybody puts the kids put $500 in, we put, 4,000, and we'll give a $5,000 cash to a young person going to college for the first time in their family's history. But
I love that. And in that creativity, that is the kind of thing that families need to be doing on a regular basis. People, frankly, in our society, particularly when you have significant wealth, the
yeah.
tendency is to focus primarily, largely on the financial assets. And
Yes.
when it comes to the owners and beneficiaries of assets, people don't think about teaching their kids about money and about giving back and values until it's time for their first trust distribution. Well,
Yes.
it's a little late by
Yeah,
then.
it's kinda late by then, right,
And the
exactly.
other thing I love about your example, what happens for most families is the adult children have never had to do anything together.
Yeah.
At most, maybe they planned a dinner for some holiday for the family, but they haven't had an opportunity to work together. And the reality is, many of us still think of our siblings as they were when they were kids.
Yeah, exactly.
And not taking into consideration that they've matured into adults who have their own perspective and maybe have matured in ways that are very different than they were when they were children. Those mindsets, that perspective of when they were children gets locked in though. So it can
Oh,
create
yes,
problems when
it
the
does.
children then inherit some significant resources and are trying to figure out how to manage it together.
Right. One
And I'm
person's
just
the irresponsible one person is the cheap one, like, whatever, you got all these stories about, people's personality types, and it's like, "Yeah, that was when I was 6. We're done."
Exactly. Exactly, and now I'm not only a lot older than 6, I'm running a successful business in my
Exactly.
own household, so give me a break
Yep.
here. Other thing that families don't think about when it comes to the next generation is that, for the most part, families who have significant wealth tend to own that wealth jointly in some way.
Yeah.
Whether you're the Buffetts, you're the Waltons, or you're
Yeah.
just you and me, the significant money is owned through some kind of an operating business. It might be owned in a trust so that you benefit from it, but you still have to deal with other stakeholders
Yep.
as it relates to accessing those resources. There might be an investment fund, there might be a family giving fund or a foundation. All of those joint holdings really require that the family learn how to navigate their differences in ways that, maybe other families don't have to. Need to learn how to manage change and also to be able to communicate more effectively so that they can manage those assets. And when
Okay.
families don't do that proactively, it ends up fracturing relationships
Mm.
and also putting the assets at risk.
Oh my gosh, I've heard this is so brilliant. I've heard you use the word parallel planning before.
Mhm.
Can you tell what does that actually mean? I'm trying to understand that.
So it means side by side. The term generational wealth,
Mhm.
family wealth, we forget that is a two-part equation. You can't have generational without the people part. You can't
Okay.
have the family without the people part.
Yeah.
Yet, most of what society tends to focus on is the wealth,
Yes.
meaning the assets, the financial assets. But if you think about it, at some point, whether your family is first generation having financial success or they've been successful for 10 generations, at some point there was no money, there was no wealth.
Right.
And it all started with an investment in the human capital, in somebody taking a risk, somebody having an idea. And whether it was, leaving their home country to come to a different country to try to build a better life for themselves and their family, whether it was inventing something or starting some startup, at some point there was no significant wealth. It
Right.
started with the individual, with the person.
Yeah.
When we get wealth in our society, financial wealth, we tend to forget about the people part. But if you look up the definition of the term wealth, it means well being. It's about the quality of our being as individuals, as humans, as communities, as families. And we tend to lose sight of that fact because our society, frankly, is so materialistic. We put so much on the financial assets. And I want to be clear, I am not by any means suggesting that we should not focus on the financial assets.
Right.
Do
It's
your
both.
wealth planning,
Both. Right.
but
Right. Right.
do your parallel planning
Yeah.
that focuses on the human element, focus on the financial assets, but also focus on the family assets. Because as
Oh,
I like to say, and most of my clients believe, that your most precious asset of everything is who you are individually and collectively as a family. So let's put as much attention on that. I refer to my work as, frankly, helping families to be as purposeful in developing and cultivating their human capital as they are in growing and protecting their financial capital. If you're interested in sustainability from generation to generation, simply putting everything in a trust is not going to do it. You've got to focus on the people part. The money, the wealth should be serving the growth, development, unfoldment of the family individually and collectively. So that's what parallel planning is, focusing on the people part.
I'm not asking for permission anymore. I'm not asking for a seat at the table. My friends, this is the first generation of us. We have a huge opportunity. We have power and influence and wealth. And we can start building the tables where we get the prime seats. Today, we want to invite you to join us as investors in venture. I know no one's asked you to do it before. It might be something that seems scary or foreign, but I promise you it's not that different than investing in a mutual fund where your retirement funds are. I want you to lean in and just learn a little bit more. How about making a commitment that in the next 12 months, you can give yourself 12 months to figure it out and to take a step. I want to invite you to be part of the new table of power and influence and wealth. You're invited. I want to sit at the table with you because we're going to make big change. We're going to make the world we've been dreaming of. Can you give me some examples of that? Because in the simplest way, you're like, everybody has their college paid for. But that's really financial. That's less about the people development part. Is it more like investing in coaching and support for family decision making and relationship building? Or can you give examples, like the best examples you have of how it, when it's done well, what does that look like?
Well, first of all, every family's different, so it can look very different in every family, but there are certain pieces of work that are very much the same. Simon Sinek, I don't know, I guess it was the 90s, really popularized the notion of knowing your why and focusing on your purpose. I think that's a vitally important thing to do, kind of like investing and taking care of the financial assets. It's necessary, but it's not sufficient. The question I like to ask is to drop down deeper and ask people, what is the source? What is the source of your why? Where does that come from? It comes from your who you are. Again, individually and collectively. So I encourage people to focus on that element of who we are. Who are we at our core? Who are we in terms of what our values are? What the guiding principles are that we want to live by? Who are we in terms of our family history, where we came from? There's interesting research that shows that the more that children know about their family history, the better they do in school. They have fewer disciplinary challenges. They have higher self-esteem. It's really focusing on the growth, the development of the individual from the inside out, not simply looking at what it is that we can buy for them. And then part of who you are has a lot to do with, frankly, how do we get along with each other? We have these stereotypes in our society that we assume, well, you're family, so you should all think alike and everybody should get along and be on the same page. Everybody knows it's not true.
Yes.
That's kind of the stereotype, right?
Yeah.
And everyone wants to think, oh, my family's great. We get along perfectly. No, you don't.
Yeah.
But it's okay. It's part of our human nature is to be different. And one of the challenges that families have is there's a tension between young people sort of coming into their own, blossoming into their full potential, wanting to be independent, to find their own way, and at the same time, stay connected to their family, be a valued member of the family. And that can be difficult to navigate because
Sure.
we, again, as human beings, our nature is, I want you to do what I want you to do in the way that I want you to do it.
Right.
Of course, I
Right.
don't want you to impose that on me, but
Yeah,
I
exactly.
impose it on you.
Yeah, in my family of origin, the political divide ended up really we literally fell apart as my family of origin. And that's I think that's happened in a lot of American families.
Mhm.
That's an extreme example, I think, for a lot of people, but we've got you've got all kinds of micro examples of that. So this is such a fascinating conversation. You've actually talked about 4 universal patterns of relationship undercurrents, like, and how to master those. Is that part of the solution here? Can we talk about that a little bit?
Absolutely, absolutely. So one of the things, again, that is I think a societal notion is that leadership is about leading other people. We talk about leading from the front, leading from behind, leading from the side. The most important person for me to lead is myself. If I can figure out who I am, what I believe, stand in my convictions, basically live my life according to the values I say that are important to me, that allows me to be a greater calming influence and presence wherever I am, whether it's in my home, whether
Yes.
it's in an organization, whether it's in the workplace. And particularly these days, there's just so much going on in the world, so much anxiety, so much built up tension and anxiousness and discomfort, dis-ease. So if you can figure out how to manage yourself in the context of all that's swirling around you, people naturally gravitate to the calm in the midst of the storm.
Yeah.
And that's how understanding these patterns can be very helpful. One of the things that our society tends to focus on too is looking at individuals. This notion that so and so is a quote problem child.
Yes.
Why? Because they don't do what you want them to do?
Well, yeah.
But the reality is, you think about it, no child was born into the world a problem.
Yeah.
Whatever behaviors we develop are really coping mechanisms that are a product of our environment. And it's the adults around the child that the child is generally, really frankly, reacting to.
Yeah.
An analogy I like to use to prove this point is the canary in the coal mine. If your listeners are familiar with that, back in the day when we had coal industry to speak of in this country, they would literally take a canary down into the mine because canaries are very sensitive beings. And if the canary keeled over, you knew that there were noxious gases
Yeah.
down there that the humans could not yet detect. And that is essentially what is happening when you have a so called problem child in your family.
That's
So, looking at these default patterns allows you to step back, to zoom out, and look at the bigger picture, the context in which whatever behavior you're seeing is happening. And it also is helpful to look generationally. We think that, if I'm upset with my brother, that's just about me and my brother. The reality is, if it's deep enough upset, there's likely some unresolved issues generations before we even came to the
yeah, of
planet.
course. Yeah.
And so looking at these patterns helps you to understand what's going on below the surface. Another way I like to help people think about this is to use the iceberg analogy. Science tells us these days that whatever we see above the waterline of an iceberg is only about 10% of
Right.
the mass of that iceberg. The 90% below the waterline is what's determining what we can see. So while we're trained to look at, so and so having a dispute over here or this happened over there, we can see that if we're focusing only on that, we're missing the big picture.
Yeah.
And we need to drop down to understand what's the relationship system, the context in which this is happening. There are four patterns. I'll just name them quickly. I don't know if we have time to go into them. But the first thing to look for is a triangle. If there is some kind of controversy or conflict going on between two people, the likelihood is there's some third person someplace. They may not be in your line of sight at the moment. Think about employees who are having some kind of a conflict. People are focused on those two employees and, what's going on with them. In many cases, it may be that, frankly, the person above them hasn't
Right.
clearly articulated what their respective roles are. Families do that all the time with
Oh my God. Of course. Oh my God. So this is so brilliant. You're amazing.
well, it's
I feel
science.
like this is like therapy and future planning all wrapped into one. And I know that's and we've never gone this deep, but your personality has always been that sort of calming, like that, you've learned the lessons well. I had no idea all this was under the surface of the science around this.
Mhm,
This is
mhm.
beautiful.
And it's neuroscience. It's
Yeah.
nothing. See, the thing about my work, people say, "Oh, you work with families on relationship stuff? You must be a therapist." No, I'm not a therapist. That's part of the problem is that we pathologize families
Yeah.
when we are really acting naturally. Most families do not need a mental health intervention.
Yeah.
Some families may, I'm not disputing that, but the reality is most people don't. This is basic neuroscience. It's basic leadership development. It's how do I be the best version of myself and give you the space
Yeah.
to be the best version of yourself. And if we have differences, how do we navigate those differences in a way that doesn't destroy the relationship?
Yeah. Yeah. This is just magnificent. I know we're almost out of time. Can you talk about legacy a little bit? I know that I mean, that's literally, the cornerstone of a lot of what you're talking about, right?
Absolutely, absolutely. And why I do the work I do, frankly, is for the legacy of my grandparents. Another story for another episode. But I think that the thing that I tend to think about legacy a little bit differently than many people. Oftentimes, we think of legacy, first of all, as some asset, what I'm going to leave
Right.
somebody in
Right.
my will or my trust. And we think about it again as something that happens like later after you die. No, I say that legacy is a verb. Legacy is who you are and how you engage in the world. It's the contributions you're making today. What we do today determines what our tomorrow is going to be and how people are going to remember us or not after we're long gone. So the key is to be intentional in designing our lives today to be the way that we want them to be today, and then that will also ensure that we're remembered or can leave behind whatever we want. And the things that are most important to most people that I deal with are not the things that they were left, the tangible things. It's the memories. It's the time they spent together. It was a comment that someone made to them. It was a helping hand someone gave them, or just somebody putting their arms around them when they were having a difficult time. Those are the things that matter most to people, not the financial assets.
Thomasina, this was beautiful. I think we need to have another couple episodes. I can't thank
Couple
you
of
enough.
episodes, okay. We
I
can
mean,
do
no, this is
tea.
one of those groundbreaking moments where I'm like, every family needs this. How can people find you and seek you out as a resource?
The easiest way to find me is to go to my website, which is developfamilyleaders.com. Developfamilyleaders.com and reach out to me there. I'm so glad you said that every family can benefit from this because people often ask me, well, how much money do I have to work with you? You only work with wealthy people. No, the work I do is not about the amount of money. The amount of money, frankly, adds to the complexity because of the ways in which we use money as a proxy for so many things in our society. One of my goals has long been, since I discovered this work, is to figure out how to what I call democratize the space, meaning make it available to every family, whether you have a lot of money, a little bit of money, or no money at all. So,
Yeah.
one of the things I'm working on developing is a group that I call the Few. The FEW is an acronym for Family Enterprise Women. And if people go to the website, developfamilyleaders.com, there will be a tab at the top on the menu for the FEW, and they can sign up for that and start getting our newsletters and alerts about upcoming programming, which there'll be some information coming out about that soon.
All right. Well, I'm telling every woman I know, and you should as well. Anyone who's listening to this, and I'm talking to my kids about this weekend, and we will probably be calling you for a consultation. Thank you so much, Thomasina, for all you're doing in the world. You are transformational. You are the kind of unbelievable gift that everyone needs by their side. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for having me, Julie. I really appreciate it and enjoyed it and look forward to coming back.